Andrew Rosindell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm looking over on the other side of the chamber and I see the coat of arms of our late dear friend Sir David Amess, who was murdered exactly 3 years ago today. He was a defender, a very staunch defender of our traditions, of our conventions and of our British Constitution. And I've no doubt what he would be arguing today would be to protect the institution of the House of Lords, and I will be doing the same, and I'm proud to do so. Madam Deputy Speaker, the English Constitution is not something that can be drafted today by a 21st century style of committee of experts. If we were to establish such a body, its product would be alien to us and offer far less respect and admiration than what we have today. Indeed, our English Constitution, our British Constitution, is our birthright and is the envy of the world. It is like a fine, intricate oil painting with brushstrokes meticulously painted by generation upon generation over a millennium. Our Constitution depicts a priceless image of the values, the character and the way of life of the British people, and I believe we must cherish and defend it and not discard it so easily without careful thought and attention to what we are doing. Of course, yes.
Thank you. You talked, the honourable gentleman talked artfully about our evolving and changing constitution in a way that was really quite moving. But I would ask you, is this not the latest evolution of? I would ask the honourable gentleman.
Asking the honourable member. Thank you.
No, he hasn't.
I would ask the honourable gentleman if this is not just the latest evolution of that evolving constitution to make it ever better.
So if we are to change our constitution so radically, and I do believe it is a radical change, then it should be done with a lot of thought and care and attention, with consultation and careful consideration. As I pointed out to my honourable friend, the member for Billericay, Basildon, earlier, I don't think this is an issue on the doorstep anywhere. I don't think during the general election anyone raised this as a serious matter that they wanted us to deal with. There are so many other issues, and yet we are rushing to make a major constitutional change without giving it due consideration. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe we share a deep intergenerational responsibility in this House, and it rests heaviest on the government of the day. We are custodians of our nation and all that belongs to it, and not its master. We have a responsibility to preserve our nation and its constitution, an obligation between those who have passed on, those who are living, and those who are yet to be born. This is the importance of the hereditary principle, and something that members opposite, and indeed some members on my own side, seem to fail to appreciate. The new Labour government of Tony Blair took a 3-inch wide paintbrush to remake this great work of art of generations in their own image. They started with what I believe to be a programme of thoughtless destruction from the removal of the law lords from the other place with the creation of a Supreme Court, a notion alien to our constitutional heritage, to the culling of independently minded, and I say this very, very clearly, Madam Deputy Speaker, independently minded hereditary peers, and the appointment of partisan placemen. It's not good. It's no good for our constitution. It adds nothing to the work of our Parliament. It now appears that today's Labour government have recklessly come to finish the hatchet job of an ill-thought-out constitutional revolution in the name of so-called modernisation. Yes, I'll give way.
I do thank the Honourable Gentleman for Romford for giving way. He's just made a point that the hereditary peers are a bastion of independence. The Honourable Gentleman from Norfolk made the point that many of the Conservative peers are long-serving members of his party's front bench. Can you explain how those two things can be reconciled?
So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've worked with members of the House of Lords over many years, in my 23 years in Parliament. They are people who are not seeking re-election, they're not seeking preferment or title. They are here to serve our country, and to help to assist this place in making better laws. And all the hereditary peers and the life peers of all parties that I've had the privilege to work with have always been there to serve. So to discard that so easily without serious long-term consideration to the effects of this, I think is a reckless decision. Madam Deputy Speaker, our Constitution is the most vital part of our shared British heritage, and the hereditary peers are an integral part of that, which cannot be replicated by modern means. Yet the argument in defence of hereditary peers, I believe, cannot only be based solely on history, however important that may be. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Duke of Wellington's already been mentioned, the Duke of Norfolk, to the Earl Attlee, the Lord Northbrook, the Viscount Craigavon, who was also mentioned earlier, and indeed the Lord Bethel of Romford. The hereditary peers bring a wealth of intergenerational experience and knowledge to our Parliament. The hereditary peers have an inherited obligation, and duty to serve. They are also invaluable to our parliamentary democracy, holding the government to account, scrutinising legislation and raising often forgotten issues of national importance. Many hereditary peers are shining examples of exemplary parliamentarians. Yes, I give way. No.
Thank you very much to the honourable member for giving way. If I follow his argument correctly, would he be in favour of reversing the compromise of 1999 and go back to having more hereditary peers in the House of Lords? Is that his argument?
I don't object to the hereditary principle. I believe that hereditary peers play a vital part in the overall mix of this place, of Parliament, the British Parliament, and indeed the principle of the hereditary principle is enshrined in our Constitution via the monarchy itself. In fact, this place, our Parliament, is made up of the Crown, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. So those who are arguing to discard the hereditary principle should beware that the Crown itself is in peril if we continue to go down this road. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may continue, the removal of the hereditary peers would be a grave loss to our Parliament and our country. It would be a purge of many substantial independent voices which are immune from the need of political patronage and work solely in the public interest for king and for country. They do not seek to be popular or to win re-election. They exist to serve our nation. It has been said that offence ought not to be removed before you know why it was put there in the first place. Labour would have done well to heed this lesson from its last period of governance, rushing to change our tried and tested system without considering the full consequences of their actions, I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, would be to commit an act of constitutional vandalism. So, why is the government embarking on this? What in God's name motivates them? Is it simply to eradicate dissent in the other place? If so, this can only be described as self-serving political radicalism. Not content with a simple majority of 157, although I think it's gone down now. I think there are a few more independents on that side now, so it's less than what it used to be from the 4th of July. But not content with that majority in the House of Commons, this government seemingly aims to eradicate dissent in the upper house through this damaging legislation. This bill entails the removal of Conservatives, crossbenchers, Liberal Democrat and non-affiliated peers, a very small number of Labour, who often provide the most substantial dissent and constructive criticism to the government legislative proposals. Worse still, I feel and I fear that the removal of the 92 hereditary peers is only the beginning. The next step would be the introduction of an age cap for membership, provoking an even more numerically significant second cull of dissent, enabling Labour to pack the other place with political appointments and abolishing any form of effective opposition in the upper house. It is patently obvious. Yes, I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
The honourable gentleman seems to be operating on the premise that all hereditary peers are Conservatives. Why does he think it is that people with entrenched privilege are naturally Conservative?
Not at all. Yes.
Interventions are made by colleagues who have been contributing and spending time in the chamber, not just wandering in. You got very lucky just then. Please go ahead.
Not at all. I say to the honourable gentleman, quite the opposite. There are many members of the House of Lords, life peers and hereditary peers, who take the Conservative whip. But frankly, they act like independents, and they do what they believe in the interests of our country, and many on the Labour side as well. And you'll find there are many more rebellions and people voting different ways on that side than on this side of Parliament, because they are there to serve and they don't face re-election. And for that reason, they're not subject to the usual pressures of lobbying, the whips and all the rest of it that we are subject to. And that's why having that element is so important and part of our mix within the success of our Parliament. Yes, one last time.
I do thank the honourable gentleman and for giving to my indulgences. This is an argument that could quite easily have been made in the passage of the original 99 bill, that the expulsion of the hereditaries would lead to a complete collapse of our scrutinies. I don't believe he is, but is the honourable gentleman suggesting that since 99, with the removal of the other hereditaries, that the House of Lords has not been fulfilling its function properly? Because that certainly isn't how I would see the current House of Lords. And if he doesn't believe that, surely removing the existing 92 will not have an impact on the scrutiny that he and I think is so important.
Not turn the clock back, but there are many very good people, very many good people who were ejected in that first legislation under the Blair government. The compromise was to keep the 92 there. I think it's a good compromise, and I don't really understand the rush to change this. I think we should keep things as they are. It is patently obvious that this bill is a precursor for a wider, and I would say scandalous programme to weaken Parliament's ability to hold the executive to account and ride roughshod over our tried and tested constitution. Not only does this bill open a slippery slope of dissent quelling, but it is attack on the merits of the hereditary principle. Logically and inevitably leads to a fundamental undermining of the primary constitutional role of the monarchy itself. Maybe there are some members on this side that would like a republic. I think the vast majority of British people would not want that to happen in this country, and so to discard the hereditary principle is a very dangerous road to go down. Madam Deputy Speaker, I urge the House to consider with the utmost seriousness the weight of the intergenerational custodianship upon our shoulders when we vote on matters such as this, which are of grave constitutional significance. The removal of hereditary peers from the House of Lords would eradicate from the proceedings of Parliament some of the wisest and most dutiful servants of this great democratic institution. I believe this House should oppose this act of constitutional vandalism and continue to uphold the good and great conventions and traditions that have provided our cherished island nation with the stability, continuity and wisdom for so many generations.